Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for Changing the Narrative: Can Radical Thinking Shape the Future of Nonprofits? I'm Jamie Goldstein with the Greater Columbus Arts Council, and together with our partners at the Columbus Arts Marketing Association and our production partner, WSU Public Media, we're delighted to bring these amazing leaders together today for today's conversation. Just a few things briefly before I introduce our speakers and turn it over to our moderator, JD Biting. I love Zoom because there's a whole lot less housekeeping. Y'all know where your bathrooms are, at least I hope. But I do need to tell you that today's session will be recorded, and that reminds me that I'm supposed to hit record. Back to that. My Post-it note did nothing for me there. And that we will share this session with you in the next few days. If there's someone you know who could benefit from the conversation, please forward the link along. Also, as soon as the session ends, a survey will pop up. It's just 5 questions, really quick. If you have 2 minutes, please complete it and help us figure out where to go from here. So I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of good content here, and it's just going to say, this is the next thing. Today's session is in webinar format, so you will only see our presenters, but you will all have access to the Q&A box for the duration of the program. Please feel free to enter questions at any time. I'll be moderating, and if there's a good place to interject, I will. We really want this to be a conversation with you. And then I'll address any leftover questions at the end, as much as time allows. Please indicate if you intend your question for a specific person. Several people have asked where the inspiration for this session came from. Like anything that grows and gains traction over time, the story is longer than I have time for here. Suffice it to say, pretty much every person I spoke to about the idea of the overhead myth and other assumptions and systems hampering nonprofit success said, yeah, we really need to talk about that. I'd like to thank my boss, Tom Katzenmeyer, for giving me the green light to work on this, and CAMA leadership for hopping on board to make it possible. Also, as you saw from our pre-readings, we are not the first to ask these questions, nor to propose change in how nonprofits operate. I do hope, however, that we can be trailblazers in enacting and demonstrating substantive change for this sector. As I've said before, many people have heard me, if anybody can do it, the people of Columbus can do it. And I have great confidence in this group of people and all of you on this call. And the time is now. 2 years of pandemic and social unrest, unlike we've seen in decades, has awakened or reawakened a broader interest in righting the wrongs and inequalities that plague our society. I'm pretty sure no one on this call would dispute that racism in this country is systemic and evil, and it must be rooted out. Whether that effort is specifically your mission or not, each of us, I know many of you personally on this call, are working in our own organizations to address issues of diversity, equality, and inclusion. The problem is much bigger than any one of us or any one of our organizations, and efforts to eradicate racism must permeate all that we do until we have true social equality. However, in order to do our work in DEI most effectively, in order to best serve our most vulnerable clients, grantees, and participants, we must have an organization with the strongest foundation possible. That means the best and most passionate people, enough resources to reach the people who want to help us with time or money, and connections and respect in the community. The respect that helps us build bridges that we need in order to make our city a place for everyone. And we must work together to do it across sectors in the nonprofit arena and across the aisles to business and government. Is what we'll discuss today truly radical? Not to me, nor maybe to you, but assuredly still to some. And those could be board members, funders, staff, even leadership. So while I'm not sure who or what percentage of people would consider these ideas radical, I do know they should not be considered so. In fact, they cannot be any longer if we truly hope to have the kind of impact in our community we dream of. It's time we all start operating like the businesses we are, not the tax structure we operate under. Before I begin introductions, I just want to say I could fill the entire hour with these folks' accomplishments. They are extremely abridged versions of their bios. Each is incredibly talented and multiple award winning, and each has been able to achieve significant results for their organization or business. We are very fortunate to have them with us today. JD Biting is a senior consultant at Benefactor Group with more than 15 years of experience in nonprofit fundraising, operations, and management. He excels in developing creative and collaborative approaches to help strengthen nonprofit organizations, and his work in the community on nonprofit boards and in leadership has given him a firsthand view of the issues we'll discuss today. I think his experience in working with corporate, foundation, and government funders on a local, state, and national level will also come in very handy. Thanks for leading our discussion today, JD. Stacy Board is the CEO and featured performer of Columbus's Shadowbox Live, the nation's largest resident theater ensemble, in addition to being one of the troupe's most popular meta performers with more than 10,000 performances under her belt. Board has pioneered meta and mega success in all the fundraising, community relations, and education efforts of Shadowbox. She is also one of the most passionate, talented, and giving leaders and human beings I know. Welcome, Stacy. Josh Harrison is president at Improving, a software development firm focused on building long-term trust with clients and stakeholders. Since Josh joined Improving in 2012, the firm has regularly been recognized by the business community as a fast growth, best place to work. He's a proponent of conscious capitalism and is actively engaged in the community in education and social service areas. Welcome, Josh. Amy Kennedy is Senior Vice President, Human Resources at Battelle, where she is responsible for the development of HR strategy, talent acquisition, compensation and benefits, employee and leadership development, succession management, organizational effectiveness, and diversity and inclusion. Not hardly anything on her plate at all. She joined Battelle in 2013 and has held several roles there, and she also used to be a teacher. Amy, welcome. We're grateful that you're here to share your wisdom with us today. Elizabeth Martinez is president and CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Ohio, an Equity Center youth empowerment organization that creates and supports one-to-one mentoring relationships. You may not know this, but the Central Ohio chapter is one of the largest in the country, spanning 15 counties and serving more than 4,700 children last year. Elizabeth has more than 18 years experience working with children, youth, and families, and has received many awards for her work. She joined Big Brothers Big Sisters in 2003 and held several roles before she becoming CEO. Elizabeth, thank you for being with us to add your great experience and ideas to our conversation. Lynette Shai is an arts marketer who partners with small to mid-sized arts organizations to increase their revenue and strengthen organizational effectiveness. In 2021, she founded Confluence Arts Solution, a fast-growing startup focused on supporting small arts organizations with marketing needs. Her marketing skills served Ballet Met for many years, dramatically increasing their media coverage and ticket sales. Lynette, I know you're a strong advocate of the essential business pillars that we'll be discussing today to maximize our potential. Thank you for joining us. JD, take it away.
Wonderful. Hey, welcome everyone. And Jamie, thank you for having all of us. And I look forward to the next hour and a half together. And my role as moderator is to keep the conversation going, not only with our panelists, but of course with all of you. And so please ask questions and we're going to have a fun time today. What I'd like to do to start, however, is 3 really quick slides just to help frame the conversation and provide some macro context, because some of these themes are going to come up throughout the course of our conversation together. So I will share my screen very quickly here. Just give me one moment. And all right, one last thing, got to reverse my display setting. All right, wonderful. So you probably have all seen and heard of the Giving USA data that comes out every June. So and it's for the year prior. So you might be asking, why am I showing you data from the year 2020? Well, that's because the 2021 data comes out on June 21st of this year. So stay tuned for that. But, and this is true any year, I could have shown you the data that starting off with who gave. And this is really the point of this slide of where does the money come from? And it stays roughly the same every year, that the vast majority of money comes from individuals in terms of philanthropic contributions. So you look at individuals at 69%, but then you add in 9% from bequests, which are basically individuals who have left this earth and bequested money, as well as foundations. Really, a lot of that comes from family foundations, not all of that from there. But when you add all of that up, at Benefactor Group, we say, greater than 80–85% of the money comes from individuals, although we also know the big role that foundations and corporations play in philanthropy, not only here in Columbus, but throughout the country. We'll also highlight that giving from corporations was down over 6% in 2020. On the flip side, who received those funds? And I know because this is an arts marketing association, but not everyone is from the arts. I do want to highlight that in 2020, giving to arts and culture was down 7.5%. This happens in almost every recession. It happened in 2009. It happened in 92. If you look back at the giving data, giving to arts and culture almost always falls during times of disruption. And at least over the last 70 years, it pops back up. If not the next year, then roaring back in a big way the following year. So another reason why to really pay attention to when this data comes out in June, to see how much giving to arts and culture has popped back up We expect that to continue to happen in the future. A few other things to note: that giving to human services was the biggest increase that year, as well as giving to public society benefit. What that is, that's United Ways, Jewish Federations, the NAACP Fund. So a lot, of course, as Jamie alluded to, went towards human services and to social justice causes during those years. One last slide that I have before we start our conversation, and this is all planting seeds for that, is this kind of wheel of supporter cultivation. When at Benefactor Group, when we talk about developing donor relationships, the solicitation aspect of it is really pretty small. You can see here in this little blue slice of the pie. And the cultivation, where the changing of the narrative and the conversations and the relationship development is the vast majority of time and effort. And it's something that not just the fundraisers on staff do, but it's the marketing folks, it's the frontline volunteers, it's the CEOs and the board. Everyone has a role to play in the cultivation, which is the biggest part. And so I wanted to show you these few slides here, again, just as backdrop, and I will stop sharing that, and hopefully I'm back here. Thumbs up, hopefully you can see my face and not my screen anymore, great. And really for the main course. So thank you, panelists, for joining us today. And I want to get right to it. And really what you'll see is we're going to explore two main themes, but because this is a conversation and organic in nature, there may be great audience questions that pop up, and we may take this conversation in any direction that it may go within the theme. But the first question I want to ask to really get this conversation, it's about framing the message. And really it's about people in workforce. In today's day and age, you see so much to be said about, the great investment that the corporate side might be doing in workforce, but what about the nonprofit side, and what do we have to do about supporting people? And so the first question, Amy, if you could take this, is what's your perspective on changing the way we talk to our supporters about workforce pay, and what are some examples of how we can do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. So if you had asked me this question 3 years ago, I would have had a totally different answer to this. So I have been a grant finder, like a grant recipient, when I was the principal of a nonprofit school, the Metro School. And I have been a grant maker. My first job at Battelle was leading our grant community engagement work. And then I found myself in this HR role, navigating compensation issues and working relationships with our board. And Battelle is technically a tax-exempt organization. And I would say we rarely, almost never talk about ourselves as a nonprofit organization. And if I could go back and give any advice to any organization who came to us for a grant or for investment, actually, I would change the entire conversation about the words that we use. I would no longer use the word, I am a nonprofit organization seeking a grant. I would say, I am a business in this community seeking an investment so that I can contribute, so that our organization can contribute to the economic continuity of this community. And I am investing in our human capital in a way that will enable us to fulfill our mission, right? Because all 501c3 organizations, all tax-exempt organizations are mission-oriented. And any profit that we might make as 501c3 organizations. See, the only difference between a 501c3 organization and a for-profit organization is what we do with the profit. We all love profit. We're like, yes to profit. It's what do we do with it? So it doesn't really matter what our tax status is. It matters like what we do with it. So we're either paying shareholders or we're reinvesting in our mission. And so I challenge all of us, myself included, right, to think how we talk about buying the best talent to enable our mission so that we can, particularly here in Columbus, Ohio, to enable our communities like cycle of economic development so that our people will stay here, so that they will be contributors to our economic engine, so that we can build career paths for them, so that we have a succession plan for the next Stacy Board, for the next Elizabeth Martinez, right? So that we have that pathway. What if we could be an attractor of talent here in Columbus, Ohio? Because instead of getting in the weeds about, well, what's our overhead rate, whatever, we say, no, like actually we recognize that it takes talent to make our product to get to our mission.
Mhm.
And I have, just lastly, like no corporation wants to be on the front page. No one wants the headline to say, well, we invested in an organization that didn't pay their people a living wage, didn't participate in a program that didn't offer retirement options, didn't offer good benefits for health insurance, that sort of thing. So framing that we're actually contributors to the economic engine and not detractors is something that I would encourage us to think about.
Amy, that's fantastic and so interesting. You just led us off with a home run to start this ballgame. Thank you very much. And I want to get others involved here too. Stacy, I saw you were nodding with a lot of those points and want you to jump in here. And by the way, panelists, jump in as you see fit, please. This is very active, but go ahead, Stacy. What do you have to say about that?
Yes. First of all, Amy, I can appreciate everything that you just said. I just thought it was right on the money. And thank you for starting the conversation with that. You know, and I would go further with that, with the terminology, specifically as it relates to my experience with Shadowbox Live. And this came from the pandemic giving us this beautiful opportunity to reinvent ourselves and to wipe the slate clean. And I even asked my colleagues, I'm like, who do we want to be? What kind of organization do we want to be? And where are our priorities with that? And as we were looking at all of this, when, you know, I see that Whole Foods and fast food, their hourly rate are higher at that point than what my newer performers were, that was disheartening and just soul crushing, because these are beautiful people that are trained to create beautiful things for our community and to have impact, and they're leading our education programs, and we had to do better. And this is a systemic problem within the theater industry. And I just determined right then, I'm like, we have to make a change. So I didn't want to talk about how I couldn't do it. I only wanted to talk about how we could do it. And we did. And it took a lot of courage. It was aggressive, but we wiped the slate clean and we said, okay, this is how we're going to do this. We are going to bump up our lower third by a considerable amount to get them where it's livable, because I don't want to talk about being a struggling artist. I don't want to talk about being a starving artist. That is not a good artist. A well-rested, a physically healthy, a mentally healthy artist is a better artist. And that means pulling back the hours. That does not mean that artists have to be there until 2 a.m, just killing themselves. No, we can't do that anymore. We have to treat our industry and we have to value ourselves. If we don't value ourselves, there's no way other people are going to value us, so that we have to make this change. And we have, and I can tell you, you know, we're a long ways away from being where I ultimately want us to be, but we have taken a huge step forward, and my people are standing taller. I think our product is better. We have reduced our performance schedule to half to what it was. I raised our prices. We've made operational changes to make us more efficient. And those things all work in concert, but also so do our funders. Our funders were all about this. Again, investing in our people. They know they know the lifestyle that we read. What we do is hard. We don't need to have all these other contributing factors make it even tougher. So I feel very passionate about this. I hope that we all take a look at this very honestly and figure out how we each work together to make this overhead myth go away. It needs to go away. The changing of the narrative is necessary. And our community will be stronger with this change. No question.
Very good. Elizabeth.
Yeah,
Thank you, Stacy.
so maybe ditto to Amy and Stacy. And if you can tell, there's a little bit of passion on this topic with the panel here, which I'm excited about. I wanted to go back to something that Amy shared, because I think it's incredibly important as we think about framing this discussion and maybe inviting others that are participating on this call to just get really curious about this conversation that we're having today. I think when we're talking about the status and terms that we use and words that we use, Amy underscored that words are important. I might also offer that words inform our worlds. And so I don't think that we're just having a conversation and thinking about semantics here. What we're really talking about, as Jamie kicked us off and talked about, this shouldn't be a radical discussion. This is an evolutionary conversation about this sector and some things that we should consider and pay attention to. But I think the importance of being able to stand up our work in this discussion, talking about the social profit value that we offer in this community, I would argue that we're charged with the task, depending on where you sit in the ecosystem. We're all charged with the task of sometimes stewarding, really thinking about transformational ways to address issues that are both systemic and generational in nature. So, by definition of that, the work is hard on steroids, right? So we need talented people to help us think about, those ideas that will help us consider not only, for purposes of what we're trying to stand up as an organization independently in this community, but really allowing us to step all the way back and leaning into this conversation about purpose over organizational mission. Like, what are we really trying to do as a community here? And how can we not only consider the talent that's required in order for us to do that, but we also have the benefit of, within our own organizations, having access to communities that, while their lived experiences can be complicated, are equally as talented as many people within our organization. And what are those vehicles and portals that we're creating, not only with our team supporting them, but vehicles to be able for those to be pathways to help build community structures, I think both Amy and Stacy has spoken to.
Wonderful. Yeah, this is so rich. I appreciate all your contributions, and wanted to reach out to either Josh or Lynette to see if, in terms of framing the message, what your thoughts are as you're hearing our colleagues today talk about this.
Yeah, I think we've kind of done a disservice to our nonprofit leaders as we've focused on overhead and expense. We've sort of trained them to, as they attract employees, to emphasize mission as sort of a fill-in for everything else. And while employees should be excited about mission, it shouldn't be the only thing they're excited about. And so I think the anecdote to that is exactly what Amy and Stacy said, which is tell the story to funders about the investment. You're going to hear the word investment a lot today, but about the investments in the workforce as a means of achieving the mission.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'll jump in.
Lynette, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Jump in.
I was just going to jump in, and I was going to jump back to what Stacy said about how she did that for her staff and invested in her staff themselves. And I love that. And last week when we were talking, Stacey also talked about unpaid internships and making sure that you're paying the interns. And that allows, she made a comment, I just wanted to bring it up right now, was she talked about how if you don't pay the interns, there may be someone that can't afford to do the work then, so they don't get that real life experience. And I think that goes back to, again, systemically, we are not set up to contribute to our community in an equitable way. So I just wanted to bring that up because
I like the term that the budget is a moral document.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great term. And then social profit, I think, is another great term, a great takeaway for this. And diving in, continuing on this theme of framing the message. Wanted to get thoughts on if anyone, again, Josh, your point about investments in the mission and framing the message in terms of outcomes that matter. And what are some great examples when you talk about the impact, the end result of either the people served or the quality of the work? What are ways that you've seen either in your organization or within this sector that have been really effective in communicating that outcome, and how best to do that in this way to frame it in a new way? What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, and
Go ahead. Mhm.
I come at this more from a board member perspective, and I think board members are the most guilty of this habit, which is we like to pay attention to things that we can count, whether that's finances or activities, rather than are we moving the needle on our mission? And I think funders get really excited when you can tell them, hey, because of all the stuff we're doing, we've reduced poverty by X%. Or because of what we're doing, high school graduation rates are up, or college graduation rates, or whatever your mission is. When you tell that story and say, if you invest X number of dollars, you're going to get this Y outcome, they get really excited about it. When you go to them and say, hey, I need $10,000 more because we have a budget shortfall, that's just not as inspiring.
Great. Who wants to jump in to add to that point, Stacey or Amy? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll just jump in that I totally agree with Josh. That's one of the things that I think we all need to do a better job of, is telling the impact and telling the story. I think for so long, organizations, there was that scarcity mentality and the hand was just out, and there wasn't an understanding that you are going to get the funding that you need. You will find the partners that align with your heart and your mission if you tell the story of what you want to accomplish and what you have accomplished. And when there's real impact, that's when it's like, the field, they come. It's kind of like that. You find the partners that are with you. And I think of funders as co-conspirators in the work to make the world a better place. And when you have that, when you have your people, it doesn't mean that the funder has to commit to funding every single program every single time. It's not that. Sometimes they're going to shift a little bit, and we have to be okay with that, because that just means there's another opportunity for somebody else to join you, but keep all the doors open and let it come freely in and out. And I think that fresh perspective of new partners is important to the work and to the organization.
Yeah, I love that. And again, like some of the things I've learned in this new role, it's like mind blowing. Like I'm that emoji with the brain exploding. So if we again, like the business terms, right? Like how you frame it. So our pipeline of funders, like we talk about our pipeline of leads for business opportunities, is one. I wonder if board meetings spent more time focusing on like a section of things every time. So our pipeline of funders, qualified leads, performance issues, succession planning, whatever the subset is, like a very business approach, so that the moment that you need to go to the board and say, actually we've had a shortfall, or like this candidate didn't come through, or this like qualified thing fell through, it's no big deal because you've done the diligence. And the board would say like, oh my God, of course, like go into the reserves, do the thing. Because it's not been, I've been on those boards where every meeting is about fundraising, 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 fundraising. And it's not been about performance managing the human capital. What are the like, what's the qualified pipeline? What's the funnel? How are we going to do it? How are we going to get there? What are our outcomes? How are we measuring against them? What's our impact? That.
I think there are probably so many things that need to be challenged, and I think it starts with self, right? I've been in leaning into this conversation, assuming my own complicity, right? Assuming that there's further examination that we need to lean into at the executive leadership level, board conversation and beyond, but this notion of what we're charged to do is complex as we think about those that we might identify as donors, investors in our work. One of the things that we've been talking about organizationally is that sometimes there could be a sentiment of kind of transactional exchange with those individuals. And how do we move the conversation from transactional to transformational? I think we start in aligning ourselves, understanding the value proposition on both sides of this discussion, right? So if we're leaning into a conversation with the donor funder who's trying to solve for something as they're thinking about their philanthropic engagement in the community, back to the thread of being a social profit entity, we're partners in this work, and being able to lean into that discussion. I think Stacy used the term partners, really building on that to say, once we see ourselves truly aligned as partners with those that we would normally consider donors, investors, or funders, I think the way that we strategize looks different. I think the way that we, have internal conversations look different. The way that we show up, the way that we feel about our work starts to really get at the root of what has historically been kind of this scarcity philosophy. I think that is so deeply rooted in our DNA that it's worthy of, every conversation we should be examining. How is scarcity showing up in this right now? Because it'll help us to start to lean into different ways of thinking about our partnership work.
Yeah, transforming that scarcity mindset into one of abundance is really interesting. Elizabeth, thank you for that, and I'd like to continue on with that if I could. If does anyone else have anything to add to that particular thread line about how to address that? What are some examples about how to do that shift, and what maybe you've seen something that has worked well for you?
I'll quickly jump
Yeah.
in. I think it just, you have to shift from a mindset of competition to collaboration. So if you have a sort of fixed mindset, or sorry, if you see it as a fixed pie, everyone becomes a competitor. They're going after the same funds. We talked about partnerships in the previous section. When you see it as, hey, we need to work on a social impact together, suddenly every other organization can become a partner, whether they're a funder or not. You can work on things together and make that impact, and you're going to look better together as a result of it.
I'll jump into, I totally agree with Josh. Thank you for saying that. I also think that, it's when you go into the mindset of, here's what I want to do. Here's what I want to accomplish. Who wants to do it with me? And that includes everybody, right? It's very open-ended. Who wants to do this with me? And because I'm going to do it, I just got to find the right people to help me do it. And it might take a little bit longer, but we'll get there eventually. And I think that's really important. I also think that it's really important that for our donors and our funders, it's not just about telling the great things that we did, but it's also holding our feet to the fire. Here are the deliverables that we talked about. Here are the things that we did, and being transparent. It's okay to say, I set out to do this. I did this. I crushed this one. This was awesome. Got to tell you, this didn't go as well as I had hoped. And I think it's because I didn't execute it correctly. I think where I made my mistake was this way. Do you have any thoughts? And getting feedback if it's appropriate? Otherwise, it's just being transparent and say, next year, here's my plan to do it even better. So doing a recap of that with your funders, I think is incredibly important, because they feel they're rolling up their sleeves. They're getting dirty with you. You know, they're going there with you. And there's nothing better than that.
It's great. You know, and I think there are, I'll add a couple points here too. I know I'm moderating, but let me say one thing, that I do see these partnership examples, you know, being in my line of work. One, you know, starting, you know, Josh, I know you're on the board of Columbus State, and I see how, you know, Columbus State President Harrison's mindset about, you know, Stacy, your point about mindset, I want to partner with Columbus Public Schools. I really want, especially with COVID and, you know, seniors and juniors in high school kind of falling, you know, really having a hard time. How can, you know, Columbus State reach down and help to bring them along? And of course, that pathway to OSU and other state level institutions. I think that's a wonderful example. Another example is you look at the work that's happening in Franklinton, you know, for this summer, where, you know, they have their anniversary, but, you know, so many arts organizations coming together to help celebrate that with the Franklinton Arts Districts, like, you know, Roy G. Biv, Wild Goose, you know, and the like, that are, you know, really coming along and have a great, you know, partnership example, you know, in that way. And I know some of the folks that are on this, listening to us now are from, you know, from Franklinton as well. So at some point, maybe they can, you know, hop in and during the Q&A to provide more about that example. But when you were saying, Stacy, giving some of these, I saw a lot of other head shaking in terms of partnerships, and I wanted to keep the ball rolling. So Lynette, were you about to say, did you have your hand raised? If I don't want to put you on the spot, so
I cannot remember what I was going to say.
Okay. Well, come back, just unmute and jump in whenever you'd like. But also some other head shakings, you know, and affirmatively in terms of that partnership model, and really how we can, you know, radical thinking comes, you know, in a world that's so fragmented now, you know, perhaps the most radical thing we could do is form community and work together. You know, it's a simple thing, but it's kind of, you know, it's gotten us, you know, it can get us even further in having, you know, organizations partner together. And I wanted to just toss it out there to see if there are other either examples or great stories of how, you know, that abundance mindset and that partnership mindset can work towards, you know, future outcomes for multiple organizations collectively. Any other comments on that piece? Elizabeth.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I want to offer, our organization has really been thoughtful about our role in the ecosystem, because we understand that no issue that we're trying to address in this community and no organization independently can solve issues, right? And so we're really clear on that, understanding how do we as a foundational resource in the conversation of youth development, focus on doing our work and doing more of our work and strengthening our work, but also recognizing who the respect for the ecosystem, who are the other players that help fill in the gaps that are not organic to the work of Big Brothers Big Sisters, and how can we be on a discussion of just referral and engagement and connection with those organizations, consider, you know, building structure and design where we can collectively focus on, you know, the outcome that we all are trying to achieve. So this notion of, you know, collective impact design, and we're starting to, you know, form pilots around that and testing some things. I think it was Stacy that talked about the, you know, the need to take risk. And I think one is, how do we expand the conversation in this community, that when we're talking about social profit entities like ours who are on this call, I think that there may be some experiences for those that are investing in our organization that probably think that, our margin for risk is way too narrow, right? And so how do we build in, back to the abundance mindset, the opportunity for organizations like ours to really think about, our work in some of the startup space, right? Can we adopt that mentality to say, hey, nobody's figured out this stuff, right? We wouldn't be in business if we, figured out a formula of how to put us out of business. But in the spirit of being able to create greater impact, we've got to be able to test in safe spaces where if you don't get it right the first go around, that you have, the understanding that that's okay, because that's how most businesses operate. And so, can there be a level playing field conversation about risk taking for organizations?
Yeah, that's a fascinating topic, and one that often isn't talked about. That notion of risk, and why not? Why can't nonprofits, launch a new venture the way that maybe a for-profit does? Because and how to best do that, and how to frame the message that would really help to, talk to a group of supporters about an idea that would help, not just advance the mission, but help the community as well. And wanted to toss it back out to the panel to see if you have advice or any feedback or examples on risk taking in this sector, and how it, maybe some good or not so good results, but lessons learned about how to, advance it forward.
I would love for Lynette to answer this question, because she took risks at Valley Met. She convinced them to invest more in marketing, and it totally paid off. It is a perfect example of why the overhead myth is hampering to nonprofit arts organizations. So Lynette, can you tell a little bit about your story there?
Sure. And actually, I love, Elizabeth, that you brought that up, because that was we can't be afraid to fail was what I was thinking, which I lost my train of thought and couldn't jump back in. So, and in line with that, so we're kind of not allowed to fail, right? So the way that I did it at Valley Met was I found pockets of money that already existed and took those and moved them into investing more money in our marketing, and then started showing how it was working. Once you can prove, and the data is there to prove that you're reaching more people, that people are engaging with you more, that your demographic is starting to shift to younger ages and just more equitable overall. Then once you can show that, then people stop pushing back on it. And we were able to shift and grow, like Nutcracker grew 50% in 4 years, which was our biggest show. And that was all through just investing more money in marketing itself, which allowed us to grow at a pace that, I mean, who would have thought you could grow 50% in just a 4-year time? So taking that risk was a huge step. So.
And it sounds like once you demonstrated some success from the risk, there was confidence and a little bit more of a leeway to continue to take the next step. And so sort of, developing that proof of concept, it was so important at first, Lynette, and to as a basis for more ventures going forward. I have another question, but wanted to see if anybody else wanted to chime in about the risk or the partnership aspect before I ask my next.
Love to.
Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, so we run a program at Battelle that is specifically designed to do that. It's designed to encourage organizations to try stuff. And our rule of thumb is for 3 years, we'll fund sort of innovative, give it a shot, see how it goes programs that are aligned with STEM. So, and we think of STEM as strategies that engage minds, not science, technology, engineering, and math. So we're not looking for someone to come in and be like, we're gonna buy calculators. That's a no-go. But we're gonna encourage critical thinking and creative problem solving, and we're going to like have people think differently about how we could get to a solution. Those are all yeses. And I would just give a shout out to Stacy Board as the first arts organization in Columbus, Ohio, who reached out to us at the Metro School to say, I think we could do something really special here. And the whole premise of the program, to Elizabeth's question, is like, fail fast. Like, give it a shot, see what works. And we love, not to say like we love failure, but we love, you tried it, it worked, it didn't work, let us know and like come back. Now the trade-off is, what we want is, okay, so this is something great and you love it and it's working. Okay, cool. Like, what are you gonna exit to keep this in your operating budget? And we're happy to find something else for you moving forward. Like, you have a different idea, great, cool, happy to try that. But we're trying to create like an incubator mindset where it's like a continuous improvement mindset, where organizations are saying like, okay, what can I do to move the organization forward in a way that I had no idea was possible? And I would just say, like, coming in from the outside, if you were going to say the largest nonprofit R&D organization in the world is working with the largest resident theater company in the country, and they've worked together for 15 years, on the surface, you might say, that's weird. But we've probably done, I don't know, 3 or 4 different single, unique, standalone projects.
And I was actually going to say to that too. I think from a nonprofit, if I was going to give any advice, it's stay in your lane. Like, don't try to do some radically different thing that is going to drain your resources. Instead, I am always, with every show we create, with every program we do, how can I maximize this effort? If I have a show, who's the community partner that seems like it would be a good partner alignment that I can promote their mission and all, and so that we lift each other up. And I think that's kind of what you're looking for. You know, in the past, I've seen, and we were actually kind of guilty with that in our early years too. It was just kind of, you know, okay, maybe I'll try this, maybe I'll try that. And that is really great, but it's best when you go, okay, here's my lane, here's what I'm doing. If I have to teach all my new college graduates how to be rock stars for what we do, because you can't go to college to do what we do, we have to train you. So, well, then why don't I just create a whole bunch of education programs for high school kids? Teaching a 17-year-old isn't any different from teaching a 25-year-old. So what if I did that? And then all of a sudden, what am I doing? I'm actually reaching out to underserved kids that don't have a means to do this, that maybe the 4-year college plan is not the right one for them. Then all of a sudden, I've got this group of kids that I've been training for 4 years that don't want to go to college, that just want to perform, and my doors are open. And so then all of a sudden, I'm developing a workforce. And, you know, that has been just unbelievably important to us as an organization, not only to see the transformation of these kids, but then to understand that they're in it kind of for the long haul. They're with us for 10 years. And how beautiful is that?
Katie, I quickly want to jump in here. You mentioned Columbus State, and I could go on for an hour just about the college. But I think one of the things that that we get right there, that the leadership team and Dr. Harrison gets right there, is partnerships. You mentioned Columbus City Schools. I want to talk about one more just as an example of what everyone here has been talking about. But we know that that non-academic barriers affect graduation rates. One of those is food scarcity. So to Stacy's point about staying in our own lane, we had a shared interest in solving food scarcity. Mid-Ohio Food Bank is excellent at solving that problem. We had a shared problem, so we worked with them on solving it. I think it happened because of that shared interest and because we were wise enough to stay in our own lane.
Yeah, calculated risk, I think, is another way to put it too. You know, you got to be smart about it, and but it's a fine balance. One thing I wanted to get to, and it's been talked about a few times, but really it's about, again, the theme of framing the message, but especially, you know, in terms of inclusion and diversity and the outcomes that perhaps some of your organizations may have with that in how it can be framed as, as an opportunity, and to not necessarily hide that message, but to really get the message out about what you're doing, especially in the, inclusion and diversity space. And wanted to see if there are any comments or examples about that in terms of framing the message along those lines.
All right, I'm gonna jump
Lynette.
first,
Yeah,
I guess, and I
Mhm.
want to say, I'm just going to start this conversation by saying, if you're putting information like that out there, you better be actually doing the work. So I don't want pandering. We don't want pushing out different narratives that are not true. Like, you actually have to be authentically doing the work. And so I just wanted to preface that and say, I think that is number one, the most important thing that needs to be happening before you can even start talking about messaging around it. So just my 2 cents.
Yeah, excellent point. Stacy.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of this has just been in the fabric of being who we are as an organization. We were body positive before body positive was even a thing, and I think, it's from an artistic standpoint, we were very lucky because we were able to kind of already be bending the norms of, we were willing to cast females in male roles and vice versa, and to not let color be a hindrance in any way. In fact, it was deepening the relationship and all of that. So I think, a lot of times I think being an artist is very helpful in this way, because you look for kind of the unseen. And I think this work is very, very important. I totally agree with what Lynette is saying, is that some people, you can't just talk about it. You need to put your money where your mouth is, and do the work, and do the hard work, and have those conversations. And we are richer because of it. There's no question. We are better because of it, and we have a long way to go. But at least the conversation is happening and people are questioning, and that is a very, very strong start.
I would offer that organizations could consider, in the sort of circling back to framing the message, that this could be an avenue for corporations to make a DE&I investment in ways that they don't even know that they could be. So, when we think about the work of Big Brothers Big Sisters or Shadowbox or arts organizations, like, if you don't know what you don't know, let me say this differently. There's an opportunity for organizations to make it crystal clear about the DE&I work that inherently you are doing, that could let corporations take credit for a DE&I investment in ways that they have not in the past.
My message is somewhat similar to Amy's, and I'm somewhat of a contrarian on this. I think a lot of organizations are on the defensive when it comes to DEI, when a lot of their work directly contributes to it. I'm going to use Columbus State as the example again. When you look at who's graduating from Columbus State and the workforce readiness that's being provided, it moves the needle on DEI. Even though the category is education, the impact is broader than that. And I just think most organizations don't tell that story to funders or corporations or whoever, to say, hey, we're already working in this area. If we had more funding, we'd be making an even larger impact.
Yeah, I would like to offer maybe just a couple of things. I think everyone's comments have been great. I feel like we could spend the rest of the time talking about this and we wouldn't kind of exhaust the need for us to continue to lean in this conversation, right? The time doesn't allow for that. But a couple ways that I want to offer my comments here. One is, to Lynette's point, I think it cannot be performative, right? There has to be a deep commitment to the work. To Stacy's comment about that it has to be, our approach needs to be aggressive, but understanding that it is the marathon conversation, right? It's going to be an ongoing discussion for us. I think from the the business side of this is there's a business case to be made about us leaning into the conversation, and maybe to Josh's point about approaching the conversation from that asset-based lens to say this is going to help us all community be better as a result of us leaning into the conversation. But it can be uncomfortable, and we should be okay with the discomfort around some of these discussions. I think for our organization, maybe this speaks to a little bit of what Amy was offering, is we've been thinking about considering the ways that we too are contributing to this discussion within our organization. You take, the vehicle of mentoring, which we believe is a really powerful relationships, are the currency for change, right? And so as we think about this DEI conversation, and then the Big Brothers Big Sisters Network nationally, we've expanded kind of DEI to include J. So we are JEDI focused organization, thinking about the justice posture that we lean into, because we first starting working with populations that come from lived experiences that can be very complex, right? Living poverty, single parent home structures. We are the first point of the position of being narrative influencers on how we're talking about young people in our community. If we approach the conversation from a deficit-based lens versus really leaning on the asset-based conversation, I think it can be problematic for us. But in the space of back to mentoring and the model and design and how powerful that can be, is we're building bridges across difference all the time. Right. And what's the opportunity for growth to happen on both sides, not only for the child involved in our program, but for the adult as well. And then, one last thing that I'll offer is that I think that when we're able to lean into this conversation, understanding that those that we are in partnership in community, meaning those that are recipient of our services, if we can partner in ways that feel like an invitation to the conversation, I think it helps advance the cause as well, right? It helps kind of move the discussion. We're then authorized by those that were, in the position to be in service with and for.
That's amazing. And JEDI, another great contribution. I love that. And the narrative influencers piece, Elizabeth. That's wonderful. But I could ask more questions, but let me check in with Jamie first, because I think we're kind of getting to the point. We want to make sure that if there are either comments or questions from the audience, I think this would be a great time to throw those in and talk about it. And if not, if there aren't any, I can ask more. But let's check in with you, Jamie. What are you hearing out there?
We had one question early on, just to clarify what the overhead myth is. And we had some pre-reading that addressed that. Dan Pallotta's TED Talk in 2013 really sort of kicked off that campaign to eliminate the overhead myth, which is, in summary, and anybody can jump in and correct me, is basically using the amount of overhead an organization has, nonprofit organization has, as the best or only metric to judge whether they are well managed and successful, when in fact the best metric is whether they're accomplishing their mission, because what they invest in matters much less. If they're accomplishing their mission, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're doing the right thing. Like, somebody might have looked at Ballet Mat's marketing budget and said, whoa, how can you be spending so much money on marketing? Well, the results are right in front of you. This is how this works, and this is something that is just accepted de facto in the business community. Spending on R&D, investing in talent, and your human capital, investing in money to get more money, whether through fundraising or marketing, but reaching more people to give you time and financial donations and resources. So I don't know. And we had some other things that have come up. There's lots of concepts here that people are starting to look at. The overhead myth is one of them. The New Power movement is another one. Conscious capitalism is another. I don't know. And
Community-centric fundraising is another one.
yeah, I don't know if
which
anybody
is-
wants to just talk, if anybody has one that they feel particularly passionate about that they'd like to talk about for a few minutes and give a little bit further explanation too. Because they're different, but they all sort of coalesce in ways across this conversation that we're having. I love your dog.
You know, one thing, and I'll just to build on that, is something that we advise as well. When we have an article about it, sort of called Conquest or Cause, and conquest was sort of the old school mentality. You know, an institution would say, I want to raise, I'm making a number up, you know, $100 million, and it's very conquest oriented thinking, like raising, you know, this, you know, hell or high water, we're going to raise this much money. And then we asked a different question of the cause model, which would still have a fundraising goal. Yes, there's still a fundraising goal, but there's other metrics that really matter too. And you know, no engagement, number of volunteers, maybe number of smaller donors that are first-time donors, things like, you know, getting the message out in a different way, and more of like a spirit around the organization. It's not about the organization getting this much money. It's about they're a conduit towards the end results, which is, you know, whatever the mission is in terms of the community benefit or the people benefit. But I think it does, you know, get to the point of, you know, getting beyond, you know, the conquest mentality and going into more of a cause and a community mentality. Anyway, just wanted to throw that log on the fire there, Jamie, what you said, and that's similarly how we look at it. And to see if I have a question I can ask, but let me see if there's any reaction to what Jamie or I just said before.
I just want to say too that that conquest mentality is the same as the scarcity mentality.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, I think it both are more transactional
Mhm.
versus, like, I think we talked about transformational, but, you know, relational, things like that, because that's really, if you understand, if the clarity is there on the mission and what you're setting out to accomplish, then the funds will support that. But if you kind of go the other way around, it feels a little empty. It's not very inspiring to rally the troops, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
So along those lines, and Elizabeth, I'll put you on the spot here. You had a quote in Columbus CEO that says, you know, you can't quarantine relationships. Do you remember that? Did you read? I hope you read that article about yourself on that, but I saw that. And I think there is a connection between a transactional mindset and relationship building. And they're two different, you know, I think those that have more of a transactional relationship saw their donors kind of evaporate more during COVID-19. And those that have, you know, a much deeper relationship, you know, saw their donors stay and had great relationships that way that continue through all of this until today. So it's the opposite of that transaction mind frame. And so wanted to just ask maybe you or others about, you know, what are some of your key ways that you strengthen those relationships, even in the face of all this adversity we've been through the last 2 years, but how have you done that and made that possible?
Yeah, well, the first thing is I want to offer a little bit of context of that quote. We were having discussion about, you know, the fact that we were, you know, we're in the business of building connections all the time. And one of the things that we had that I considered to be both a privilege, but certainly was advantageous to us as we were in the space of pivot and everybody was thinking about, you know, how do we continue to provide service during this time, is we had the army of resources, volunteers, you know, everyone just readily available. And, you know, we have relationships that have been together for 3 weeks in this organization and relationships that have been together for 10 years. right? And so you have volunteers that were wanting to get quick access to their young people. And so they helped us, right? They were definitely part of the aiding committee and facilitating some of those connections. But what I'll say is during this time for us, I think it has been very interesting to see the amount of support that we have received as an organization. It's been comforting, maybe affirming to say, you know, the work that we're doing is important. It has value to those that have been partners in the work of Big Brothers Big Sisters. I think that one of the interesting things that we saw kind of manifest early on in the pandemic, as many of us were focused on just trying to figure out what was going on in the world, there's a lot of community conversation about the crisis, right? And how do we navigate and deal with the crisis? And I think sometimes as we're in the midst of crisis, it can be challenging for us to think about, you know, hopefully we'll be beyond the crisis and then we have to deal with the aftermath. And so what I think for our investors, partners, donors in this work, because of the nature of the relationships and the intimate understanding in kind of the vehicle that we have by way of creating relationships as a way to support young people, not only in spaces of education, but social emotional support, that we could do two things at one time in this community. We could address kind of the crisis and stop the bleeding and deal with the immediate thing, but we also had to pay attention to keeping the discussion on upstream discussion, right? Like, how do we make sure that we're also getting in front of what we know is going to be an issue 2 to 3 years from now, and we have to tend to two things at one time. If not, you know, this issue is going to be too much for us to wrap our arms around. So I think for us, being able to have constant communication about how we were navigating and how we are continuing to navigate through some of the challenges that are before us, and really listening a lot to those that are in partnership with us. So I think it's not just always about talking to those that are part of our network, but also being the listening ear to make sure that we're conscientious about our relevance during this time. I think one of the most dangerous things that we can do as an organization is, for us to exclusively read the books that we author, right? And so that we think that we're doing the right thing. We think that we're kind of available to provide support, but are we really doing that? And that was important for us to do during this time for kind of all of the stakeholder groups that were wrapping their arms around us very tightly during this time.
That was great. Thank you for that, your perspective. Either I saw Josh, you're off mute. If you have a comment, I know Stacy, you did for a second there, but Josh, why don't you go ahead if you have something?
Real quick, if I could pull on any one lever that I think would help with a lot of what we're talking about today, it's civic engagement. More than money, more than marketing. If we can increase civic engagement, a lot of these challenges ease away. And I think, so when an organization is just a name on a spreadsheet, it's really easy to make poor decisions. When you've been in the building, when you've volunteered, when you've met with the staff, you've met with the clients, suddenly you have a lot more clarity on what really matters. And for my fellow panelists and any nonprofit that's watching, there's a great organization called BESA. If you go to BESA.org, it's essentially the Uber of nonprofit volunteering. So you can sign up for whatever organization interests you. They make it easy. I think the more institutions that realize that, the better off they'll be.
Also, just want to, what I was going to say, and again, I'll make this brief as well, is, when Elizabeth was talking about listening, I think that is so incredibly important. And it's not just about listening to feedback for yourself of, are we, could we do better and all that, but it's also listening to the conversations around you to see if there's an opportunity there that is being discussed, that they're kind of just talking around you, right? They're just having a conversation saying that there's a need, and being able to listen and say, can I potentially help? Can I partner in this way? And I think that that is probably one of the most rewarding things that comes out of partnerships, is when it's not that you were asked for something, but you're hearing, whether it's reading the news and, you know, the social unrest. And we determined that we had a show called The Dream that we had presented years ago, and the schools were unable to do field trips. So we recorded during COVID, we recorded the show, The Dream, that talked about the movement of the 60s and how it just took one person to be brave enough to speak about an issue, whether it's low wages or, you know, or all the issues that they were dealing with. And we recorded it and sent that. We were able to serve 3,700 students, which we never could have done those numbers during COVID, you know, in non-COVID times. And so again, hearing what our community needed, feeling that, and feeling like perhaps we could create something that would be of service and of help, and then everybody wins.
That's great, Stacy. And I do want to make sure that we have check back in with you, Jamie, about any audience questions that any panelist or all panelists could help answer.
We have a general question. If any of you have any specific examples of how your marketing staff or team has helped you shift the narrative.
Okay, I guess I'll chime in as a marketer.
Go for it.
I would say first, I think I'm going to address it because most people here today are marketers, and I'm going to say that you guys are the boots on the ground. So let's remember that the messaging and the public face and all of the stuff that you guys are putting out all the time can reflect the beliefs that we're talking about here today. So even though sometimes we think of marketing as just putting out specific events, and marketing the next thing and advertising, I actually look at marketing as supporting the entire organization, and how we're messaging for the entire organization and putting that out there. So from a marketing standpoint, I think that we are key players in helping to bring this information to the community and to light. So I just wanted to put that out there, even though it's not specific. As far as marketing roles and teams, I'll go back to Ballymet because it was my most recent team that I had built. And I think it's finding what people are good at and what they believe in, and giving them the work that matters to them so that they can help change the narrative. And I know that sounds like a roundabout way to talk about it. But if people believe in what they're doing and they believe in what we're promoting, then change happens. And so a lot of that is just identifying the right people. And this is jumping way, way, way back to the beginning of the conversation. And I don't really want to go too far down there, but I do want to call out in today's world, a lot of times as marketers or as people that are hiring marketers, we put out there, you know, such and such experience, a bachelor's degree in marketing or a master's degree in marketing. And I think we're cutting out some key players that have life experience and that have belief and passion for issues like this, and, you know, arts organizations in general. I don't want to say nonprofit, but work in this area, and we're cutting out a key component of people that can bring new light to things. So I know I kind of circled way, way, way around that, but just a couple key points that I wanted to make. So if someone has something specific, feel free to ask.
I think it's fantastic to come full circle. In fact, and Amy, I'll get to you. I wonder if we want to, at this point, like have some full circle thoughts or, you know, final thoughts here, unless Jamie, there's more questions, but if anyone, Amy, let's go to you, and then after you, Amy, if anyone else has sort of some capstone things they want to say, I think we can go there at this point. Go ahead.
So I'll do my sort of closing thoughts right now. Starting with the marketing, we've actually reallocated marketing resources to our talent strategy. So where we used to be doing client marketing, we've reallocated to like candidate marketing, job descriptions, targeted marketing for, all the marketing people know how this works, but we're doing that. And it's a game changer. right? To think differently about that talent acquisition piece. So that is for sure. And bringing the discipline around the job descriptions and the website and how we talk about the work and what it means to work at our companies and all of that, it matters. So I encourage that. And then the approach around finding the partners. And Stacy talked about this. And I will build on what Stacy said about like finding the right partner. So as a former grant maker, there are times when I'm like pulling the ask out of the partner, like bring me the ask because I cannot wait to give you this money. And there are times when I'm like, oh, I do not, please, no, like it is painful. And I encourage all of us on the call to find the partner where it is easy. Like the partners are out there. We all want the easy relationship. It is better for everyone. It is better for everyone. There is no guilting. There is no entitlement. There is no convincing that will happen. Because the person who is me, who is sitting in that conference room with you, there is nothing you can say to that person who can fix it. Because the me has the CEO and the distribution committee and the political staff and the board and all the things. So find your partner so that it's easy, so that the me says to the you, can you get me that like proposal? Because we're really ready to make you that grant. Those are my things. And value your people. Like, listen,
Yeah.
their money in this community is as valuable as your funder's employee money. So it's an economic engine.
Amy, when you say easy, I hear authentic, natural, right?
Yes.
Like,
Oh,
it's
yes.
just like, yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay, good. I wanted to clarify. I think that's really important. That authenticity is what makes it easy, is what makes it successful, right? That it fits.
Yeah.
Great.
Can I say this one time? I loved that work at Battelle. I mean, it was one of my favorite jobs. Aside from teaching, it was my second favorite job. Ladies and gentlemen, I've never been guilted into giving a grant, ever. Ever.
Great point. Thank you for sharing that piece. Elizabeth, go ahead.
I just have a quick soundbite as maybe a takeaway to those listening, and trying to be very simple in delivering this. But I think we started the conversation thinking about identification of organizations. And maybe if I could solicit support, a little bit of a recruitment campaign for those on the call. So whenever you're having a conversation about those of us in this social profit sector, where someone defines us as a charity, that we could invite the conversation to lean into understanding the business side of the work, right? There could be, it could be just a very natural opening to a discussion of the work that we are doing in this space. So maybe maybe we'll call the campaign "Don't Call Me Charity." And we just recruited some folks naturally here on the call, but I think it's a simple soundbite, but it could be very transformative to continue this conversation in other spaces as well.
Fantastic. Love it. Love the call to action, Elizabeth. Thank you. Stacy, Josh, you don't have to, but anything else you'd like to say?
I want to follow on to what Elizabeth just said, is we shouldn't be defined by what we don't do. Nonprofit is like something that's not happening. It's not, the profit isn't happening. Let's talk about what we do. What's our purpose? What's our impact? And a follow on to that is, we live in this world every day. We assume others understand what we're doing and what that impact looks like. They may not understand that in a 30-second pitch. So be very intentional about letting them know the details and all the great things that are being done.
Fantastic.
I'll just
Mhm.
jump in and say, first of all, I really appreciate Jamie putting this together. This is such an important conversation. And I am so inspired by everyone that spoke on this. So thank you very much. I mean, I've learned a lot and certainly I'm going to take that back with me and have that guide me. But to what Elizabeth was saying, I think, and Josh, actually just everybody. I think the most important thing that we can do is that we can not think of ourselves as a business. We just happen to be in the business of creativity or social enterprise or whatever. And to keep talking in those terms, to keep holding ourselves accountable for the work that we do and sharing the story. I think for so long, as to what Josh said, there was this assumption, well, everyone knows what we're doing. And if they don't know. And I think for a lot of us, the ability to really distill the work is clarifying for us and energizing. And what I'm hearing from everybody, and I know I live my life this way, is I want to be around energizing people that are helping me do energizing programs so that I can energize our community. And when you have a partner, like Amy, where you feel like it's just not working, I have walked away. Not enemy thing. I just say, I don't think the universe is aligning us right now. And I don't think that we're going to have a great product. So let's just hold and revisit this opportunity maybe in next year and kind of see where we are and see if we can't make things happen a little bit better. And sometimes it's probably the lesson I've learned the most is it's more important to say no than it is to say yes right now. And that has really served us well to make sure that we are very focused on the work that is going to have the most impact, and so that we can fulfill our mission to the best we can possibly do. So, thank you.
Great. This has been so energizing for me, and I appreciate, Stacy, you putting that capstone on this conversation. I will then now thank you all. It was an honor, and let me pass it to Jamie. Jamie, anything else? Any other questions? Any other closing statements from your part before we end our session today?
Real quick, we have 8 minutes left. I did want to make sure, Lynette, did you have any closing statements or any closing thoughts that you wanted to add?
I mean, I think I kind of spoke in a very roundabout circle. I mean, my biggest thing that I always talk about is big picture thinking. Just make sure you're looking at things from a high level as often as you possibly can, because that's where you see the interconnection between everybody, and you don't get caught in the minutia of the day to day. You don't get caught in we've always done it this way, so that's the way that we're going to do it, because that is notorious for all arts organizations. And that's probably my biggest 2 takeaways.
Thank you. Thank you all. I do want to call out really quickly, Catco added, and this speaks to what many of you have already touched on. Last summer, when they got clear about their purpose, they rewrote job descriptions with the purpose and vision front and center. That allowed them to recruit talent who actually wanted to live their purpose, like you have, Stacy, and a tactic that they suggest can actually work for someone else. I think I've heard, first, I want to thank all of you. This has been incredibly energizing for me too. For those of you listening, when you close your browser, you'll see a survey. Please answer that, so it will help guide us in our future conversations. Elizabeth, I love "Don't Call Me Charity." You've got an ambassador on that one right now, right here. Remember the language. Words have power, right? And they do shape our world. So the language that we use to describe ourselves, to talk to funders, is really critical. We had some great examples of how to shift that narrative, literally, with different words when we go out to try and raise money. And I love those last few lines from you, Stacy. Keep talking in these kinds of terms. Hold ourselves accountable. Tell the story, the true story of what you do, and keep our people purpose-driven. And I think that purpose-driven piece is really critical. We all can recite our mission, what's the purpose, right? So my purpose is to be grateful to all of you right now. Thank you very, very much to everyone who joined us today. We're grateful to WSU for hosting. Kate, you're amazing. I love you. And stay tuned. We'll follow up with you guys with a link for the session. Share it if you can. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.